But one of the biggest issues, of course, that we have is the border. And I want to talk about the border in a second, but we got to talk about its connection to some of the terrible price increases that we've seen thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. Now, the media doesn't talk about this enough, if they talk about it at all, but one of the biggest problems for Wisconsinites and one of the biggest problems for our fellow Americans all across the country is that housing has gotten way too expensive. I'm the first millennial to ever serve on a major party presidential ticket, and I want people in my generation and people who are younger than I am to be able to afford the American dream of homeownership. I want, if you just got married or you're thinking about getting married, I want you to be able to raise your family in a nice and stable home. That is one of the critical components of the American dream, and too many of our young people feel like homes, and they're right, homes have gotten so expensive, rent has gotten so expensive that a lot of people can't afford it anymore. Well, let's be honest about why homes are so expensive. Number one, mortgage interest rates have gotten way too high, and that's connected to the inflation. That's connected to the fact that Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote on trillions of dollars in new spending. To get home prices more affordable, Donald J. Trump and I are going to fight to lower interest rates so that our young people and everybody else can afford to buy a home. But we've also got to make it easier to build more homes again. We've got to make it easier for our great construction firms and our great construction workers to build the homes that American citizens want to live in again. But we've also got to be honest, because it doesn't matter how many homes we build if we allow illegal aliens to live in homes that ought by right to go to American citizens, then we are never going to make home ownership affordable in the United States again. So here's the most important thing that we need to do to make sure that American citizens can afford to buy a home is make sure that American homes go to the American people, not to illegal aliens who have no right to be in this country in the first place. And that brings me, of course, to what I think is maybe the most critical issue. You know, you go back and forth. Is it the economy and the terrible inflation that we're experiencing, or is it the border? And, of course, all these things are connected. Because when Kamala Harris came into office promising, bragging that she would open up the American southern border, she didn't think once and she didn't talk once about the effect that it would have on American citizens. Kamala Harris didn't talk about the fact that when you brought in thousands upon thousands of children into Wisconsin schools who don't even speak the local language, that it would make American children have a worse education. Kamala Harris didn't talk about the fact that when you brought in millions of people and they go to hospital emergency rooms all over our country, that the wait times in those emergency rooms would skyrocket for American children. Kamala Harris didn't talk about the fact that the Mexican drug cartels would be arrested as far north as rural communities in Wisconsin because she rolled out the red carpet and opened the American southern border. Kamala Harris didn't talk about those problems because Kamala Harris doesn't care about those problems or the American citizens who are suffering. We got to get back to an American president who puts our interests first, and that's Donald J. Trump. We cannot keep doing this. We just got to stop doing this. It's the craziest thing that I've ever seen. Look, I'm obviously not a Democrat, but I remember when Bill Clinton was president in the 1990s, the way that Bill Clinton talked about illegal immigration, he'd beat a radical right-wing Republican in 2024. The media would call him a racist. They'd call him a xenophobe because Bill Clinton believed, criticized him on many other things, Bill Clinton believed that we ought to have a border. Donald Trump believes we ought to have a border. I think 90% of our fellow citizens believe that we ought to have a border. Why don't we have a border? Because Kamala Harris refuses to do her damn job. So let's say to Kamala Harris, you're fired, get out of the Oval Office, you're not welcome in the people's house anymore. Now, I will say, as much as it bothers me that Kamala Harris is doing a terrible job, and as much as it really bothers me that she lies about the fact that she has all the connection in the world to these policies. You watch, again, I wouldn't recommend you do it because you lose about 20 IQ points. But if you watch a Kamala Harris rally, she will stand up before the crowd and say, on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis affecting American citizens. On day one, we're going to make housing more affordable, and we're going to secure the southern border. And of course, anybody with an ounce of common sense is saying, day one was 1,400 days ago, Kamala. What have you been doing the whole time? So she runs away as far away from Joe Biden as she possibly could. In fact, I think that if an interviewer asked her, have you ever seen Joe Biden, she might answer no, because even though she is the sitting vice president, she tries to pretend that she has nothing to do with the policies of the last 4 years, even though, of course, there are clips of her on camera bragging about those policies, saying that she was the last person in the room when decisions were made, casting the tie-breaking vote on these policies, and now Kamala Harris, she wants to wash her hands and say, I had nothing to do with it. Well, luckily for us, luckily for the Trump campaign, while Kamala Harris tries to run away from the Biden administration's policies because they're so unpopular, she also occasionally will open her mouth and tell the truth. And I don't know if you've seen her interview that she did with The View a couple of weeks ago. I'm glad that most of you didn't see it. Look, I will never complain about running for vice president except about this one topic. I watch Kamala Harris on The View so that you don't have to. That is the sacrifice that I take upon myself, my friends. This is a life of service I've asked for. It's not always easy. Sometimes I got to watch Kamala Harris on The View. But look, the media says she only does softball interviews. Even the friendly media says she only does softball interviews. I think she's done one genuinely tough interview. And I know we've got a lot of baseball fans in the great state of Wisconsin. And the problem with a softball interview is that you still got to be able to hit a softball. And I don't know that Kamala Harris could hit a T-ball based on the interviews that she's given, because they asked her, what would you have done differently than Joe Biden? And remember, the whole narrative of her campaign is that she's got nothing to do with Joe Biden. And she says, in a moment of apparent honesty, nothing comes to mind. Now, I said this last night, this could very well be the slogan of the Kamala